Hello and welcome to Middle East Matters this week on France 24 with me, Nadia Massi. Here's what's coming up in the show. Fresh momentum to end the conflict in Yemen after Saudi Arabia and Iran re-established diplomatic ties. A prisoner exchange, a signal of those improved relations. Is press freedom under attack in Jordan? We meet journalists risking arrest to report stories of corruption and political incarceration. And millions celebrate Nowruz and the start of spring as the holy month of Ramadan also gets underway. But first, we start the programme in Yemen, where the two sides in the conflict have agreed to free nearly 900 people in a prisoner exchange. The deal comes less than 2 weeks after Saudi Arabia and Iran re-established diplomatic ties after years of hostility. The two regional powers have backed opposing sides in Yemen's war, and their rapprochement has galvanised efforts to end the conflict, as Oliver Farry now reports.
A rare occurrence in the 9-year war. Yemeni government forces and Houthi rebels agree under UN auspices to a prisoner exchange involving 887 detainees in total, an accord that comes 10 days after a rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, two regional powers engaged in a proxy conflict in Yemen. Riyadh gives its support to the Yemen government, while Tehran backs the Shiite Houthi rebels, who control 60% of the country. In the Houthi-held capital Sana'a, the local population are hopeful.
God willing, the agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia will be a good sign for the Arab world and the world as a whole, and particularly for Yemen and Yemenis to put an end to the war.
But in Taiz, the country's third city held by the government, people are more circumspect.
I
don't think the restart of diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran will lead to peace in the region. It won't stop the war.
An end to the Yemen conflict would benefit both regional powers, each of whom are trying to expand their influence in the Middle East, free of Washington's oversight.
Both sides have interests of their own. The Iranian side wants to try to bypass the international isolation. And for Mohammed bin Salman, he needs a period of domestic calm while he focuses on Vision 2030, which was announced in 2016. So we're now at the halfway point. And any distraction in the form of international or regional tension would be not something that he would welcome at this point.
But there's still some way to go before an end is in sight to Yemen's war, a quagmire for the two powers, and one which has cost 380,000 lives since 2014.
We turn now to Jordan, a country where journalists say it is becoming harder to report freely. The monarchy has long been a red line for the Jordanian press, and criticising the king would likely result in a heavy fine or a prison sentence. But now, stories about violence against women and corruption are increasingly off limits as well, as France 24's Chloe Domin found out when she visited Amman.
In the heart of the old city of Amman, Jordanians have been buying newspapers at this kiosk for 50 years. But these days, the headlines don't surprise readers very much.
The quality of Jordanian media has deteriorated in the last few years. It's obvious there are topics you can't talk about.
The list of banned topics is set by the courts via gag orders. Red lines include any critique of the royal family, but also cases of corruption, some protests, and reports of violence against women. In the outskirts of Amman, journalist Bassel Aucourt tries to fight such oppressive measures.
No compromise when it comes to information. This is our motto.
Bassel is the founder of one of Jordan's only independent news websites. In 2020, he was arrested while covering a teacher's strike. His office is also regularly subjected to searches and fines.
Every day you have to bear in mind that you can be targeted by one of the tools of repression the regime uses to limit freedom of the press.
Despite the threats, he continues to investigate a sensitive topic with Malik, one of his most trusted reporters.
We want to know more about the political prisoners.
We have to shed light on human rights abuses and constitutional violations.
Basil and Malik could face up to 3 months in jail if their work is deemed too controversial. The Syndicate of Journalists is one of the only local institutions defending them. Ibrahim Kabilat supports tens of colleagues who are being prosecuted under laws supposed to tackle cybercrimes or terrorism.
These laws are interpreted very broadly to effectively allow tribunals to silence journalists and, by extension, all of society.
Ibrahim fears self-censorship could become the norm in his profession. Internet is also closely monitored, but some can still find relative freedom on social media. Luay Hazem is part of a regional collective of cartoonists set up in 2013 in the aftermath of the Arab Spring. Their drawings are very popular online.
When the revolutions of the Arab Spring started, all the regimes promised reforms, but they didn't enact them, and they didn't fight corruption either. The role of satire in this region today is to remind people that what started 11 or 12 years ago is not over yet.
The Hashemite Kingdom now ranks 120 out of 180 on the World Press Freedom Index. When asked by France 24 for a comment, the Jordanian authorities refused to answer our questions.
Next to Israel, where there is no sign of a let-up in the demonstrations against Benjamin Netanyahu's judicial reforms. In fact, the anti-government movement is spreading to parts of society not normally known for protests, including Israel's military. Hundreds of reservists did not show up for duty last week, a rare act of resistance in a country where military service is mandatory. Our correspondent, Gwendoline de Bono, reports.
Saying that this is not part of these men's usual daily routines would be an understatement. All of them are either reservists or have served in two of the most prestigious units of Israeli special forces, Sayeret Matkal and Shaldag. They've taken over the headquarters of the Kohelet Forum, a right-wing think tank that supports and campaigns for justice reform.
I am doing a lot of days in reserve. No, I'm not going to serve in a country that somebody take the democracy to dictator. I'm going to sit in my house and going to the street till it's come back. Then I go to reserve.
The authorities accuse these protesting reservists of being anarchists, a surprising label to put on General Relik Shafir. This former fighter pilot was part of the squadron that bombed the Ozark nuclear reactor southeast of Baghdad in 1981. He now manages a group of more than 1,000 former army pilots, all committed to fighting these reforms.
This is not actually a judicial reform, but it's a combination of a judicial revolution, a theocratic revolution. Active pilots, F-15, F-16, whatever, they're flying and say, we will not fly airplanes in this particular dictatorship environment.
Reserve pilots command respect within the army because their units rely on them to a great extent. They regularly conduct strikes on Gaza or Syria. These two fighter pilots repeat an argument widely shared among active military as well as reservists. A weakened judicial institution could expose them to international prosecution.
The International Court in Hague can pursue soldiers only if their internal justice system is not handling it. So if we don't have Supreme Court, then we are open to allegation by at the Hague international court.
Because we have such a strong judicial system, we were always protected because of that. But if you are going to eliminate that, nobody is going to protect soldiers.
For now, the Israeli government has acted deaf to concerns raised by reservists. Addressing those refusing to serve, the communications minister said, "Go to hell, Israel doesn't need you."
Finally, millions of people in the region are celebrating Nowruz this week. The holiday marks the start of spring, and unusually this year's festivities coincide with the start of the holy month of Ramadan. So what impact is that having on those who celebrate both? Have a look in this report.
Nowruz, or Persian New Year, marks the first day of spring and is celebrated by millions of people in the Middle East. Though it's a 3,000-year-old pagan feast, the countries that celebrate it are predominantly Muslim. This year is unusual in that Nowruz falls at the same time as Ramadan, putting extra financial pressure on people, such as here in Kurdish regions of Iraq.
There are only 2 days of Nowruz before Ramadan begins. When you have 2 different events, there are fewer customers. Besides, the economy is not good nowadays, so there is less demand. The sales of Kurdish costumes are much lower now.
Those celebrating also face a challenge because of the obligation to fast from dawn to dusk during Ramadan. This makes difficult the Sizdah Bedar, or Day of Nature, on the 12th day of Nowruz, when Iranians traditionally go for picnics in parks. Shiite theologians have advised the public to gather without eating this year. There's also discontent among Iranians after 6 months of protests in which hundreds of young people have lost their lives, and also a rising cost of living.
This year it's very sad. I used to always love Nowruz, but I'm so unhappy that I haven't even tidied up the house. I haven't bought goldfish or a jar of wheat sprouts like I always used to do. I'm very sad for various reasons, particularly the economic situation and the death of so many of our young people.
Straitened economic circumstances and civil strife alone mean that what should be the most colourful event of the year will be a little less cheerful for many celebrating.
Well, that's it for this programme, and that's it from me. Thanks for watching. Just time to wish you a Nowruz Mubarak, and we'll be back at the same time next week.
They're known for their cuisine and saying hello with a kiss. They only work 35 hours per week, when they're not on strike, that is. How true are these clichés about France? Every week, Florence Villeminot tears apart stereotypes. Join us for insight into French culture and current events to understand what makes the French so unique.
French Connections, presented by Florence Villeminot on France 24 and France24.com.